We often talk about grief and loss forcing us to grow up. There's a poem I really love by Edna St. Vincent Millay called "Childhood is a Kingdom Where Nobody Dies." And it's about that exact aspect. How childishness and innocence and naivety comes with not experiencing grief and loss. It's only once we've experienced grief that we really have to grow up. We have to step into the adult world. The realization of death and what it means is part of being an adult. The poem goes like this. Childhood is not from birth to a certain age, and at a certain age the child is grown and puts away childish things. Childhood is the kingdom where nobody dies. Nobody that matters, that is. Distant relatives, of course, die, whom one has never seen, or has seen for an hour, and they gave one candy in a pink and green striped bag, or a jackknife, and went away, and cannot really be said to have lived at all. And cats die. They lie on the floor and lash their tails, and their reticent fur is suddenly all in motion with fleas that one never knew were there, polished and brown, knowing all there is to know, trekking off into the living world. You fetch a shoebox, but it's much too small, because she won't curl up now. So you find a bigger box and bury her in the yard and weep. But you do not wake up a month from then, 2 months, a year from then, 2 years, in the middle of the night and weep with your knuckles in your mouth and say, "Oh God, oh God." Childhood is the kingdom where nobody dies that matters. Mothers and fathers don't die. And if you have said, "For heaven's sake, must you always be kissing a person?" Or, "I do wish to gracious you'd stop tapping on the window with your thimble," tomorrow, or even the day after tomorrow, if you're busy having fun, is plenty of time to say, "I'm sorry, Mother." To be grown up is to sit at a table with people who have died, who neither listen nor speak, who do not drink their tea, though they always said tea was such a comfort. Run down to the cellar and bring up the last jar of raspberries. They are not tempted. Flatter them. Ask them what it was they said exactly that time to the bishop, or to the overseer, or to Mrs. Mason. They are not taken in. Shout at them! Get red in the face! Rise! Drag them up out of their chairs by their stiff shoulders and shake them and yell at them! They are not startled. They are not even embarrassed. They slide back into their chairs. Your tea is cold now. You drink it standing up and leave the house. In this poem, she describes that turning point between childhood and being grown. And she says it doesn't have a specific age. It's not like all these years are childhood and all these years are adulthood and there's just that one age. Once you hit 18, you're an adult now. But childhood is instead not knowing death. And according to the poem, there are certain kinds of death that don't count, right? There are the distant relatives that die. You may see death, but not really understand it, not really feel it, because it didn't affect you. And even the deaths that do make you cry, like the cat, still doesn't change your life, so that months from then, years from then, you wake up in bitter grief in the night because the grief overwhelms you and wakes you. I think part of the power of this poem is the way that it focuses on very specific aspects. For example, in the stanza where it says, "And if you have always said, 'For heaven's sake, must you always be kissing a person?' Or, 'I do wish to gracious you'd stop tapping on the window with your thimble.'" The fact that those are such specific statements to say really draws out their potency. Kind of like when your mother or father shows you that sort of annoying affection in public and you're just like, "Oh, come on." It's very easy to get annoyed at very simple and unimportant things in people you love, and to express those annoyances without really fully meaning to. But as the poem points out, tomorrow, or even the day after tomorrow, if you're busy having fun, is plenty of time to say, "I'm sorry, Mother." Those people you love will always be there for you. They'll always be around to apologize to later, and so if you make a mistake, there's always tomorrow. Until one day there isn't. And when that begins to sink in, it really has an effect. When the day comes when that person is no longer with us, we tend to ask ourselves, why was the last thing I said something annoying, instead of, "I love you"? Why did I care about my mom giving me that hug in public? Or why did I care about those silly little comments she was saying? Or that little tapping she was doing? Why did I blow up about that? That wasn't important. I should have been spending that time telling her or him how much I love them. And Millay defines being grown up as sitting at a table with people who have died. I don't think this image is literal, but she describes it as if it were literal. You're sitting surrounded by people who have died, and they don't ever respond to you. I think this has to do with the fact that once we've experienced grief and loss, those people are still always with us, and we keep wanting them to come back. We call them back. There's really all the stages of grief in this last section of the poem. At first, you try to pretend like it didn't happen. You try to still talk to that person. There's all the things you still want to say. They neither listen nor speak. They do not drink their tea, though they always said tea was such a comfort. And if you try to tempt them to come back, if you try to lure them back in, they can't. They're gone. And even if you get angry at them and you shout and you yell and you try to get them to in some way come back because of your anger, it still doesn't work. They still can't return. Until finally you have to accept it. And you have to accept that your life is different now. Your tea is cold now. You drink it standing up and leave the house. It's a very sad conclusion, but it is a moving on. And the tea, which used to be such a comfort, is no longer very comforting. We can never go back to that childish innocence, that naivety, that inexperience with death, but we can move on.